Sir, I need to see some ID. Why? I'm just sitting here. Routine check. Your ID, please. This is ridiculous.
Let's move along, please. Doors are closing.
Sir, I need you to stand up.
The train doors slid open with a sharp hiss. People moved fast, shoes scraping, bags brushing, eyes avoiding. He stepped in last. Quiet, measured. He scanned the seats. One empty. Right in the middle. He moved toward it. A man shifted his leg out, blocking the way. Not fully, just enough. "Excuse me," he said calmly. No answer. The man kept staring at his phone. The woman beside him pulled her bag closer, tighter, like space had suddenly become expensive. "Is this seat taken?" he asked again. The man exhaled slowly. "Yeah." A pause, then a small voice behind. "No, it's not." Everyone turned. A young girl, pointing. The air changed. The man clicked his tongue. "Someone's coming." "No one is," the girl said. Her mother pulled her back. "Don't start." Silence stretched. Heavy. The man finally moved his leg. Slow. Reluctant. "Fine. Sit." He sat down. Careful. Calm. But the space around him stayed cold. The woman leaned away. The man adjusted again, creating distance. Like it mattered. Like he mattered too much. Across the aisle, someone whispered, "They always do this." He heard it. Of course he did. His jaw tightened. But he said nothing. The train jolted forward. Metal screamed against metal. And then a uniformed officer stepped into the carriage, eyes scanning, sharp, cold. He stopped, locked directly on him, and said, "Sir, I need you to stand up." The train moved before he could settle fully. A sharp pull, metal grinding, the city sliding away outside the window. He adjusted slightly in his seat. Not too much. He didn't want to bump anyone. The man beside him leaned further away anyway. Like distance was safety. Like closeness was risk. He kept his eyes forward. Calm. Steady. Across the aisle, two men whispered. Not quietly. They always pushing like that. Yeah, no respect. He heard every word. Each one landing soft, but heavy. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his notebook. Old. Edges worn. Pages filled with careful handwriting. He flipped it open, tried to focus, but the air felt tight, like something unseen was pressing down. Behind him, the girl spoke again. Why didn't he want him to sit? Her voice was small, but clear. Her mother pulled her closer. "Because it's not your business." But there was space. "Enough!" The mother snapped softly. Silence returned, but it wasn't quiet. It was loaded. The kind that watches, judges, waits. He wrote one word, then stopped. His pen hovered, shaking just slightly. He closed the notebook, slowly, carefully. Across from him, a man locked eyes with him, held it too long, then looked away quickly, like he'd been caught. The train lights flickered once, then steadied. A soft announcement crackled overhead. Next stop, Central Hall. A shift moved through carriage. People straightened, checked their phones, adjusted jackets. Important stop, important people. He exhaled slowly. Almost there. Then the door at the end of the carriage opened. Hard, sharp. A uniform stepped in, boots heavy against the floor. The officer scanned the space. Left, right, slow, deliberate. The energy changed instantly. Whispers stopped. Eyes dropped, except his. He watched. The officer's gaze moved across passengers, then stopped. On him. Held. Too long. The officer started walking. Each step loud. Controlled. Intentional. The man beside him shifted again, creating more space, like he wanted no part of what was coming. The officer stopped directly in front of him, close enough to feel, close enough to dominate. "Sir." The word wasn't respectful. It was a setup. He looked up calmly. "Yes." A pause. The officer studied him, head tilted slightly, eyes narrow. "I need you to stand up." The carriage froze. No one moved. No one spoke. He blinked once. Slow. Is there a problem? The officer didn't answer. Instead, his hand rested on his belt, near the cuffs. I said, stand up. A beat. The girl behind him whispered, why him? No answer. No one answered. The man beside him leaned even further away now, almost pressed against the window, like distance could erase association. He placed his notebook gently into his pocket, took a breath, slow, controlled, then looked back at the officer. Still calm, still steady. Can you tell me why? The officer's jaw tightened, just slightly. You're being asked to comply. That's not a reason. A ripple moved through the passengers. Subtle, dangerous. The officer stepped closer, lowered his voice, but made sure everyone could still hear. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The words hung there, heavy, threat wrapped in politeness. His fingers tightened slightly on his knee, then relaxed. He glanced around. Quick, just once. No support, no voices, only eyes, watching, waiting, some curious, some uncomfortable, some agreeing. He looked back at the officer, and slowly he began to stand. The officer's hand moved, resting fully on the cuffs now, ready, prepared, expecting something, anything. The moment stretched, thin, sharp, ready to snap, and just as he rose to his feet, the train suddenly jolted, hard, throwing the balance off, and the officer grabbed his arm, firm, too firm. Don't move. Silence exploded, because now it wasn't a request anymore. The officer's grip tightened, fingers digging into his arm, not enough to hurt, but enough to control. I said, don't move. I'm not, he said calmly. His voice stayed level, but his heart picked up, fast, sharp. The train steadied again, metal settling, passengers shifting back into place. But the tension didn't settle. It grew. The officer didn't let go, didn't loosen, didn't step back. Instead, he leaned closer. You got ID on you? The question came quick, flat, not curious, accusing. He nodded slightly. Yes. Then show me. A pause. Why? The word landed wrong. The officer's eyes hardened. You're being questioned. For what reason? Another ripple through the carriage. People leaned in, without moving, listening, watching, waiting. The officer exhaled through his nose. Slow, controlled anger. You match a description. Of what? The officer didn't answer. Instead, his grip shifted. Tighter now, thumb pressing into bone. You want to cooperate or not? He glanced down at the hand on his arm. Then back up. I'm not resisting. Then don't start. I didn't. A beat. The officer's jaw flexed. ID. The word sharper now. Less patience. He reached slowly. Deliberate. Every movement careful. His free hand moved toward his jacket. The officer reacted instantly. Stop. His hand froze midair. I said slowly. I am. Slower. The word dragged. Heavy. Controlled. Like everything he did was already wrong. He adjusted his movement. Even slower now. 2 fingers. Then 3. Reaching into his pocket. The carriage held its breath. Behind him, the girl whispered, why is he talking like that? Her mother didn't answer this time, because she didn't know, or didn't want to say. He pulled out his wallet, carefully, held it up. Can I open it? The officer didn't respond immediately, just watched, eyes scanning every detail. Then, go ahead. He flipped it open, slow, showed the ID. The officer didn't take it, didn't touch it, just leaned in, reading, studying, looking for something, anything, a reason, a mistake, a flaw. The silence stretched too long. What exactly is the issue? He asked again. Quiet, controlled. The officer straightened slightly, still blocking him, still holding space, still holding power. You nervous? No, you should be. The words landed cold. A man across the aisle shifted, uncomfortable, but said nothing. Of course he didn't. The officer nodded toward the ID. This yours? Yes. You sure? A pause. He blinked. Once. What does that mean? The officer tilted his head. Slight smirk. Like he'd found something. You tell me. The air tightened again. Thicker now. Harder to breathe. I just did. The officer took a step closer. Invading space. You from around here? Yes. Where exactly? Is that relevant? It is when I ask it. The response came fast. Sharp. A few passengers looked away now. Too much. Too uncomfortable. But still, no one spoke. The bystander near the door shifted her weight. Opened her mouth slightly, then closed it. Not yet. Not enough courage. The officer finally reached out. Snatched the ID. Quick. Rough. He didn't react. Didn't move. Just watched. The officer examined it again. Longer this time. Turning it slightly. Like the truth might fall out if he looked hard enough. You got anything else on you? No. Bags? No. Why not? I'm going somewhere close. Where? He paused. Just for a second. Then, Central Hall. The officer's eyes flickered. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. But it was there. Something changed. Small. Quick. Then gone. What for? The question came slower now. Measured. But still loaded. He met his eyes. Held them. A calm stare. I have something important to do. The officer studied him again. Long. Silent. Searching. Then, a faint chuckle. Low. Dismissive. Yeah. He didn't respond. Didn't explain. Didn't fill the silence. And that made it worse. For the officer. You think this is funny? No. Then why you smiling? I'm not. You were. I wasn't. The tension snapped tighter. The officer stepped even closer now. Chest almost touching his. Voice dropping. You got an attitude problem? No. You sure? Yes. A long pause. The kind that decides things. The officer glanced around. At the passengers. At the watching eyes. At the silence that supported him. Then back at him. Decision made. You're coming with me. The words hit harder than expected. A shift moved through the carriage. Subtle, but real. The girl gasped softly. The bystander near the door took a step forward, then stopped. Still stuck. Still unsure. He stayed still. Didn't pull away. Didn't argue. On what grounds? The question was steady. Clear. The officer handed the ID back, but didn't let go immediately. Held it between them. Control, even in that. I don't need grounds to ask questions. You do to detain me. A flash in the officer's eyes. There it was. Challenge. He let go of the ID. Abrupt. You're not being detained. Then I'm free to sit. A beat. The officer's expression hardened. No. The word cut clean. You're stepping off at the next stop. Silence dropped again. He didn't move. Didn't speak. Didn't agree. The train began to slow. Brakes screeching. Metal grinding. Too early. This wasn't a scheduled stop. Passengers noticed. Confusion spread. The announcement didn't come. No warning. No explanation. Just slowing. Stopping. For him. The officer leaned in one last time. Voice low. Final. Don't make this worse. The doors began to open. And suddenly, everyone understood. This wasn't random. This was intentional. And he realized they weren't just questioning him anymore. They were removing him. The train stopped with a violent screech. Too sudden. Too sharp. People grabbed seats. Poles. Anything. Murmurs spread instantly. This isn't the stop. What's going on? The door stayed closed. For a second too long. Then, a loud click. They slid open. Cold air rushed in. Uninvited. The officer stepped back slightly. But not away. Still blocking him. Still controlling the space. Let's go. I didn't agree to this, he said. Calm, but firmer now. The officer tilted his head. You don't have to agree. A man across the aisle spoke up suddenly. Just go, man. Why make it a big deal? The words hit fast. Sharp. He turned slightly. Looked at him. The man shrugged, like it was obvious, like compliance was normal, like this was nothing. This doesn't concern you, he said quietly. It does if you're holding everyone up. The man shot back. A few heads nodded, not loudly, but enough. Support, not for him, for the officer. Of course. The officer watched this, silent, letting it build, letting the pressure grow. Then, "You hear that?" the officer said softly. "People just want to move on." He didn't respond, didn't break, but inside, something shifted. Not fear, not yet, but wait, the kind that presses down slowly. The bystander near the door finally stepped forward, just a little. "He hasn't done anything," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried, clear, nervous, but real. The officer turned his head slowly, looked at her, measured. "Ma'am, I didn't ask for commentary. I'm just saying, and I'm just telling you to step back." The tone changed, sharper now, authority fully visible. She froze, took half a step back, eyes dropping, not because she agreed, because she felt it, the power, the risk. Silence swallowed her voice. Again, the officer turned back to him. Last chance. A pause. The doors still open, waiting, like a decision had already been made. He exhaled slowly, looked around. One more time. No one moved. No one stood with him. Only watched. The girl behind him whispered, "Mom." Her voice cracked. Her mother pulled her closer. "Don't look." But she did. She kept looking. At him. At what was happening. At what no one was stopping. He nodded once. To himself. Then stepped forward. Out of the seat. Into the aisle. The officer immediately moved with him. Close. Too close. Guiding. But really pushing. They walked toward the door. Every step louder than it should be. Every eye on them. Heavy. Judging. Some relieved. Some uncomfortable. Some satisfied. At the door, he stopped. Just for a second. Turned slightly. Looked back inside. The same people. The same silence. The same distance they created. Now even wider. Then he stepped off. The platform was nearly empty. Cold. Gray. Quiet. Too quiet. The doors didn't close. Not yet. The officer stepped out behind him, then spoke into his radio. Low voice. Controlled. "Yeah, I've got him." The words hit different now. He turned slightly. "What does that mean?" The officer ignored the question. Continued speaking. "Trains delayed. Need a minute." A pause. Static. Then, "Copy." The officer clipped the radio back. Looked at him again. New posture. Less questioning. More certain. "You're going to stand right here." "I already am." "Don't get smart." "I'm not." The officer stepped closer again. Invading space. "You keep saying that. And you keep assuming things." A flash of irritation crossed the officer's face. Quick. Sharp. Gone just as fast. Hands where I can see them. "They are higher." He raised them slightly. Slow. Controlled. The air felt colder now. Or maybe it was just different. More exposed. More real. Inside the train, people were still watching. Through the windows. Faces framed in glass. Distant now. Safe. The bystander stood near the door. Frozen. Eyes locked on him. Still there. Still watching. But not moving. Not crossing that line. Not yet. The officer began pacing slightly. Small steps. Controlled energy. Like he was building something. "You nervous now?" he asked. "No. You should be." "You said that already." The officer stopped. Turned sharply. "That attitude." "What attitude?" The interruption landed. Clean. Direct. The officer stepped forward fast. Closing distance. Lowering his voice. "You think you're smarter than me?" "No." "You think you know your rights?" "Yes." A pause. Long. Heavy. The kind that decides direction. The officer studied him. Really studied him now. Not just looking. Evaluating. Calculating. Then, a slight smile. Not friendly. Not even close. "You people always say that." The words dropped. Clear. Unhidden. No disguise anymore. Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't passive. It was sharp, cutting, real. He didn't react. Not outwardly, but something inside shifted again. Stronger now. Clearer. This wasn't misunderstanding. This wasn't confusion. This was intentional. The officer nodded slightly, like something had been confirmed, then reached for his radio again, paused, looked at him one more time, and said, "Let's make this official." His hand moved, down, toward the cuffs. And this time, he didn't hesitate. The click was soft, but it cut through everything, metal shifting, the officer's hand resting on the cuffs. Ready, certain. He didn't move, didn't step back, just watched, calm, but fully alert now. "You're not putting those on me," he said. Not loud, not aggressive, just clear. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I am." "For what?" "You'll find out." That's not how this works. The officer stepped closer, boots scraping the concrete. This is exactly how it works. A pause. Cold air between them. Sharp, unforgiving. Inside the train, people leaned closer to windows, watching, safe behind glass. The girl pressed her hand lightly against it, eyes wide. The bystander stood near the door, frozen, still there, still not moving, still choosing. The officer reached out suddenly, faster this time, grabbing his wrist, twisting it slightly. "Don't," he started, but the pressure increased, just enough to control, not enough to leave marks. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting." "Feels like it." "It's not." The officer shifted behind him, trying to angle his arm back, to position, to control, to justify. "This is unnecessary." "You made it necessary." "How?" "You didn't cooperate." "I did everything you asked." "Not fast enough." The words landed hard, because they weren't about truth. They were about control. A second officer stepped onto the platform, younger, quieter, watching, taking cues. "What's the situation?" he asked. The first officer didn't look at him. Non-compliant. The label dropped instantly. Clean. Simple. Wrong. The second officer nodded. Didn't question it. Of course he didn't. He stepped closer, positioning himself slightly to the side, blocking any path. Not that there was one. "You want to explain that?" he asked. Calm. Measured. "I asked why I was being stopped," he said. "That's all." The second officer glanced at the first, then back at him. "That's enough sometimes." The sentence lingered. Quiet, but heavy. Inside the train, someone shook their head. "Should have just listened," a man muttered. Another voice always turns into something. The words floated out, through the open door, through the space, through the silence. He heard them all. Of course he did. The first officer tightened his grip again. "Last warning. You already said that. And you're still talking. Because you're not explaining." The officer exhaled sharply, then pulled his arm harder, trying to force it behind his back. The movement was sudden, rougher this time. His balance shifted, foot sliding slightly. But he didn't fall, didn't panic, just adjusted, stood firm. "This is not lawful," he said. The second officer stepped closer now, voice lower, more controlled. "You don't want to go down that road." "I'm already on it." A beat. The first officer paused, just for a second, then leaned in, close to his ear. "You match a description." There it was. Finally. But it came late. Too late. "What description?" he asked. The officer straightened, didn't answer. Instead, he looked toward the train, at the watching faces, at the silent approval, then back at him. "Suspicious activity." "That's not a description." "It is today." The words hit like a door closing. No logic, no standard, just authority. The second officer crossed his arms, settling in, supporting. "You carrying anything illegal?" he asked. "No." "Mind if we check?" "Yes." The answer came fast, clear, no hesitation. A flicker passed between the officers. Subtle, but real. There it is, the first officer said. There what is? Attitude. No, that's a right. The second officer tilted his head, studying him now, different from the first, less aggressive, but still aligned. You sure you want to do this here? He asked quietly. The question sounded like advice, but felt like a warning. I didn't choose this place, he replied. You're choosing how it goes. No, you are. Silence fell again, heavier now, more defined. The first officer stepped back half a step, creating space, not to release, but to reset, to escalate differently. He reached for his radio again, pressed it. Yeah, I've got a match. The words landed hard. The second officer looked at him, then at the first. You sure? He asked quietly. The first officer didn't hesitate. Positive. A lie. Clean. Confident. Dangerous. Inside the train, confusion spread. People looked at each other now. Less certain. Less comfortable. The bystander finally stepped off the train. Just one step onto the platform. Close enough to hear everything clearly. Far enough to still step back. If needed. What did he do? She asked. Her voice shook, but it came out. The first officer didn't even look at her. Ma'am, step back. I'm just asking. Step back. Sharper this time. Final. She hesitated, caught between fear and something else. Something stronger, but not strong enough. Not yet. She stepped back. Again. The moment passed. Again. The officer turned back to him. Decision locked. You're being detained. The words hit differently now, because they were official, because they carried weight, because they changed everything. He stood still, didn't resist, didn't argue, just looked at him. Steady, clear. On what charge? The officer didn't answer, didn't need to. His hand went back to the cuffs, pulled him free, metal catching light, cold, certain, final. And just as he stepped forward to lock them on, a voice cut through the platform. Wait! Sharp, clear, unfamiliar, and suddenly everyone turned. Wait! The word cut clean through the tension, sharp enough to stop movement, strong enough to shift attention. The officer paused mid-step, cuff still in hand. Half raised, everyone turned. A woman stood a few steps away, phone in her hand, not lowered, not hidden, recording, her voice steady, clear. What exactly is happening here? The first officer's jaw tightened, instantly, like the question itself was a problem. Ma'am, this is an active situation. Step back. I am back, she replied. Didn't move, didn't lower the phone. But I'm also recording. A ripple moved through the platform. Passengers leaned closer inside the train. Now they weren't just watching, they were witnessing. The second officer shifted slightly, more aware now, more careful. Who are you? He asked. She didn't hesitate. Press. One word. Heavy. Real. The first officer let out a short breath. Annoyed. You need to stop recording. No, I don't. A pause. The kind that changes tone, changes power. Public space, she added. Calm. Controlled. I'm allowed. The officer glanced at the camera, then at her, then back at him. Something in his posture changed, just slightly. Less force, more calculation. He lowered the cuffs, but didn't put them away. Not yet. What's your name? She asked, looking directly at him now. Not the officer. Him. He hesitated, just for a second. Then, Daniel, his voice steady. Simple. Real. Daniel, she repeated softly, then turned back to the officer. Why are you detaining him? The first officer crossed his arms. Buying time. Suspicious activity. What activity? No answer. What did he do? Silence. The camera stayed up. Steady. Unblinking. The second officer stepped in slightly, trying to regain control. We receive a report. Of what? She pressed. A description. What description? The same words. Again, but now they sounded weaker. The first officer stepped forward again, voice sharper. You're interfering. I'm asking questions. You're escalating. No, she said calmly. You already did that. The sentence landed hard. Too clean, too accurate. A few people inside the train shifted. Uncomfortable now, the man who spoke earlier looked away, avoiding the window, avoiding the moment. The bystander stood frozen again, but her eyes had changed, more focused, more aware, like she was seeing it clearly now. The first officer turned back to Daniel, resetting, reframing. You refuse to cooperate. I didn't. You questioned instructions. I asked for a reason. Same thing. No, it's not. The officer pointed slightly, not aggressive, but deliberate. You see that? He said, looking at the journalist. That's the problem right there. She didn't react, didn't lower the phone, didn't blink. Accountability, she asked. The word hung there, uncomfortable, unavoidable. The second officer shifted again, less certain now, eyes moving between them, between camera and control. Daniel stood still, hands visible, posture calm, but his mind moved fast, watching everything, every word, every change, every crack. The officer took a breath, then tried again. You matched the description of someone causing disturbance. What disturbance? Daniel asked. You tell me. I wasn't doing anything. That's not what we heard. From who? No answer. Again, the silence was louder now, because it had an audience, because it had a lens, because it couldn't hide. The journalist stepped closer, just slightly, still outside their space, but closer to the truth. What train car? She asked. What? The officer snapped. The report, she said. What car was the disturbance in? A pause. Too long. The second officer looked at the first, then back at her, then at Daniel. Something wasn't lining up. He felt it. Everyone did. But no one said it. Not yet. The first officer exhaled sharply. You're twisting this. I'm clarifying it. Another clean hit. The kind that exposes without shouting. Daniel spoke again. Quiet, but firm. There was no disturbance. The officer turned to him quickly. There is now. The threat was clear, unhidden, intentional. The journalist captured it all. Every word, every shift, every truth trying to hide. Are you placing him under arrest? She asked. The question changed everything, because now it had to be defined. Clear, official. The officer hesitated, just for a fraction, but it was enough. No, he said. Then why are you holding him? A beat. Silence again. Then, we're verifying. With what? No answer. Daniel watched him, carefully, because now, it wasn't just pressure. It was exposure. The officer's grip on the situation was slipping. Not fully, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to change direction. He looked at Daniel again. New expression. Less certain. More defensive. You said you're going to Central Hall. Yes. For what? The question came slower now. Measured. Different. Daniel held his gaze. Calm. Unshaken. Then said, You'll find out soon. The officer narrowed his eyes. Something about that answer didn't sit right. Didn't fit the narrative. Didn't match the assumption. And for the first time, doubt appeared. Small, but real. The radio on the officer's shoulder crackled suddenly. Loud. Unexpected. All eyes shifted. He grabbed it quickly. Pressed it. Go ahead. Static. Then, a voice. Clear. Urgent. Unit 12 confirmed location. The officer responded. Platform side. Possible match. A pause. Then, stand by, we're checking something. The officer froze. Just slightly. What do you mean? He asked. No answer. Just static. Then, hold position. The line cut. Silence dropped again. But this time, it felt different. Like something had changed. Like something was coming. And for the first time, the officer didn't look in control anymore. The radio went quiet. Too quiet. The officer didn't move. Didn't speak. Just stood there, listening to nothing. Waiting. Daniel watched him closely. Every shift, every breath, every crack. The second officer glanced over. "You good?" he asked. The first officer didn't answer right away. Then, "Yeah," but it didn't sound right, didn't feel right. The word came slower, heavier, less certain. The journalist kept her phone steady, zoomed slightly, focused. "Who were they checking?" she asked. No response. Was there actually a report? Still nothing. The silence was different now, not controlled, not dominant, exposed. Daniel spoke. Calm, measured. "You said I matched someone." The officer looked at him. Quick, sharp. "I said stand by." "That's not an answer." "It is for now." "For who?" The question landed. Direct. The second officer shifted again, less confident, more aware. He looked at Daniel differently now, not as a problem, but as a question. Daniel noticed. Of course he did, and he used it, not loudly, not aggressively, just enough. "You stopped the train," he said quietly. "For what?" The word spread, through the platform, through the people still watching from inside, through the moment. The bystander took another step forward, closer now, close enough to be part of it. "He didn't do anything," she said, stronger this time, her voice steadier. The officer turned to her, but slower now, less sharp. "Ma'am." "No," she cut in, a small shake in her hands, but not in her voice. He just sat down. The sentence hit differently, because it was simple, because it was true, because it came from someone who saw it. The journalist shifted her focus to her. "Can you say that again?" she asked. The bystander hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. He just sat down. Clear, recorded, real. The officer's jaw tightened again, but this time it wasn't control. It was pressure. "You don't have the full picture," he said. "Then explain it," the journalist replied. He didn't, couldn't, because there wasn't one. Daniel took a breath, slow, grounded, then said, "You're building something that isn't there." The officer snapped back quickly. "You don't get to decide that." "I don't have to," Daniel replied. "It's already clear." A beat. The second officer looked at the first, then at Daniel, then at the journalist. The shift was visible now. Small, but undeniable. "Maybe we should just," he started. The first officer cut him off. "No." Fast, sharp, final, but it felt forced, like he was holding something together that was already falling apart. Daniel noticed that too, and he leaned into it, just slightly. "You asked where I was going," he said. The officer didn't respond, just watched. Careful now, guarded. Daniel held his gaze, didn't look away, didn't soften. "Do you know where Central Hall is?" A pause. The officer nodded once. "Yeah." "Do you know what's happening there today?" Silence. The officer didn't answer, didn't guess, didn't risk it. The journalist spoke instead. "There's a conference," she said. Daniel turned his head slightly, looked at her, then back at the officer. "There is." A beat, "and you stopped me on the way to it." The words carried weight now, different weight. The second officer's expression shifted again. Recognition, or something close to it. The first officer didn't react outwardly, but his eyes changed, just slightly. "You could go anywhere," he said. "I could." "Doesn't mean anything." "Not yet." The sentence landed quietly, but it stayed. The journalist leaned in slightly. "What kind of conference?" she asked. Daniel didn't answer her directly, kept his eyes on the officer. "Important enough to delay a train for?" he asked. The officer's jaw flexed. "That wasn't about you." "It became about me." Silence again. But now it felt heavier on the officer, not on Daniel, not on the crowd, on him. The radio crackled again, loud, sudden. Everyone flinched slightly. The officer grabbed it quickly, too quickly. "Go ahead." Static. Then, "Unit 12 confirm name." The officer glanced at Daniel, just for a second, then spoke into the radio. "Daniel." A pause, longer this time. The platform held its breath. The journalist leaned closer. The bystander didn't move. The second officer stared at the radio, waiting. Then, the voice came back. Different tone now. More alert. Repeat full name. The officer hesitated. Just for a second. Then, Daniel Carter. Silence. Then static. Then, stand by. The line cut again. The officer lowered the radio slowly. Too slowly. Daniel watched him, carefully, because now something had shifted again. Bigger this time. More serious. More real. The second officer stepped closer, lowered his voice. "You sure about this?" he asked. The first officer didn't answer, didn't look at him, just stared at Daniel, trying to read him, trying to understand what he had stepped into. Daniel met his gaze, calm, unshaken, then said quietly, "You should have asked that earlier." The words settled, deep, uncomfortable, and for the first time, the officer didn't have a response. The platform felt different now, quieter, but heavier, like something invisible had just stepped in, and no one knew where to stand. The officer didn't move, radio still in his hand, grip tighter than before. The second officer watched him closely, waiting for direction, for certainty, for something that wasn't there anymore. Daniel stood still, hands relaxed now, not raised, not forced, just present, controlled. The journalist kept recording, zoom steady, frame locked. "This just changed, didn't it?" she said. The question wasn't loud, but it carried. The officer looked at her, then away. "Stay out of it." "I am in it." The response came clean. No hesitation. The bystander stepped closer again. This time, she didn't stop. She stood just behind the journalist now, close enough to be seen, close enough to be counted. "He didn't do anything," she repeated, stronger now. No shake, no doubt. The officer exhaled slowly, trying to reset, trying to rebuild control. "You don't know that." "I was there," she said. Simple, final. The words landed harder this time, because they couldn't be dismissed, because they were witnessed, because they were real. The second officer shifted again, looked at the first, then at Daniel, then at the ground, then back up. Something wasn't sitting right anymore. "You said Central Hall," he said quietly. Daniel nodded. "Yes. What for?" The question came softer this time, less aggressive, more careful. Daniel looked at him, then briefly at the journalist, then back again. "A speech." The word hung in the air, unexpected, out of place, but real. The first officer reacted instantly, a short scoff. "Yeah." No belief, no interest, just dismissal. Daniel didn't respond, didn't defend it, didn't explain. The silence did more. The journalist leaned in slightly. "What kind of speech?" Daniel paused, just for a second. Then, on leadership, a ripple moved through the platform, small but noticeable. The second officer looked up again, eyes narrowing slightly, processing. The first officer shook his head. "Anyone can say that." "I didn't say it for you," Daniel replied. The line landed sharp, clean, controlled. The officer stepped forward again, trying to reclaim space. "You think this changes something?" "It already has." Another pause, longer now, because the truth was shifting, and everyone felt it. The radio crackled again, louder this time, more urgent. The officer answered quickly. "Go." Static. Then, "Unit 12, confirm you are with Daniel Carter." The officer swallowed slightly, barely visible. "Confirmed." A pause. Then, "You need to stand down." Silence. Absolute. The words didn't just land. They hit. Hard. The second officer blinked, looked at him, then at Daniel, then back at the radio. The first officer didn't respond, didn't speak, didn't breathe. "Repeat," the voice said. "Stand down immediately." The line stayed open, waiting, watching. The officer lowered the radio slowly, too slowly. His grip loosened, just slightly, the cuffs in his other hand, still visible, still present, but no longer certain. "What does that mean?" the journalist asked. Quiet, but direct. The officer didn't answer, didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone, just stared at Daniel, like he was seeing him for the first time, really seeing him, not as a problem, not as a target, but as something else. Something he didn't understand before. The second officer stepped in slightly. Lower voice. "What's going on?" he asked. The first officer shook his head. "I don't know." And for the first time, it was honest. Daniel took a step forward. Small, controlled, not aggressive, but intentional. "You stopped me," he said quietly. No anger, no raised voice, just truth. "You delayed a train." A beat. "You called for backup." Another. "You were about to detain me." The officer didn't respond. Couldn't. Daniel held his gaze. Steady, clear, and you didn't know why. The words settled deep because they were undeniable, because they were witnessed, because they were recorded. The journalist didn't move, didn't speak, didn't interrupt, because this was the moment, the shift, the turning point. The officer looked around, at the platform, at the train, at the people watching, at the bystander, at the journalist, at the second officer, then back at Daniel. And for the first time, he looked smaller, not physically, but in presence, in certainty, in control. The radio crackled one last time. Final, clear, Unit 12, confirm you understand the order. A long pause, then confirmed. The word came out slower, heavier, like it caused something, because it did. The officer reached down slowly, clipped the cuffs back onto his belt. The sound was quiet, but it echoed through everything. The platform, the train, the moment. The shift was complete, but the silence that followed was louder than anything before. And Daniel realized this wasn't over, not even close. The cuffs clicked back into place, soft, final, but it didn't feel like control anymore. It felt like retreat. The officer straightened his posture, tried to recover something, anything. "This is still under review," he said. The words sounded official, but empty. The journalist didn't lower her phone. "Then explain it," she replied. Calm, sharp. "Why was he stopped?" No answer. "Why was the train delayed?" Silence. "Why were you about to detain him?" The questions stacked, one after another. No space to hide. The officer shifted his weight, looked toward the train, avoided the camera, avoided Daniel, avoided the truth. The second officer stepped forward slightly. Lower voice. "We may have misinterpreted the situation." The sentence landed carefully, chosen, controlled, but it cracked something open. "Misinterpreted?" The journalist repeated. "That's what we're saying?" "It's being assessed," he added quickly, trying to hold it together, trying to contain it, but it was already slipping. Daniel spoke, quiet, but firm. "You didn't misinterpret." Both officers looked at him. "You assumed." The word hit harder, because it was simple, because it was accurate, because it couldn't be softened. The first officer's jaw tightened again, but he didn't argue, didn't push back, didn't escalate, because now he couldn't. The power had shifted, not completely, but enough. The bystander stepped forward again, now standing beside the journalist, not behind her, beside her. "He didn't do anything," she said, again, but this time it sounded like a statement, not a defense. The journalist nodded slightly, still recording. "Can you confirm your name?" she asked her. The bystander hesitated. Then, "Emily," her voice steady, clear, real. "Emily," the journalist said. "You saw everything?" "Yes." "What happened?" Emily took a breath, then spoke. "He walked and sat down, and people started acting like he didn't belong." A pause. "He didn't say anything." Another. "He didn't do anything." The words filled the space, replaced the silence, replaced the narrative. The officer looked away, because now there was another voice, another truth, one that didn't come from authority, but from reality. The journalist turned slightly, back to the officer. "Do you want to respond to that?" He didn't, couldn't. The second officer spoke instead. "We're handling it." "How?" she asked. No answer. Again, Daniel watched all of it. Calm, still, but inside, everything was sharper now. Clearer, not just what happened, but why. The train doors began to close. Slow, mechanical, passengers still watching through the glass. But now, their expressions had changed. Less judgment, more discomfort, more realization. The man who spoke earlier looked down, avoiding everything, avoiding himself. The train pulled away, leaving the platform quieter, more exposed. The journalist lowered her phone slightly, but not completely. Still recording, just not as obvious. "Daniel," she said. He looked at her. "Yes. Can I ask you something?" "You already are." A small pause. Then, "What were you going to Central Hall for?" The question came softer now, less confrontational, more curious, but still important. Daniel looked past her, toward the distance, toward where the train had been heading, then back. "I'm speaking there." The words landed again, but this time they hit differently, because now people were listening, really listening. The second officer blinked. "You're a speaker?" "Yes." "On what?" Daniel held his gaze, then said, "Accountability." Silence. Deep, heavy, unavoidable. The journalist almost smiled, not out of humor, but recognition. The irony, the timing, the truth. The first officer finally spoke. Low, controlled. "You could have said that earlier." Daniel looked at him. Long, steady. "You could have asked." The words cut clean. No anger, no volume, just truth. The officer didn't respond, didn't argue, didn't defend, because there was nothing left to use. The radio crackled again. "Final. Unit 12 supervisor en route." The officer closed his eyes briefly, just for a second, then opened them. Different now, less certain, more aware of what was coming. The second officer stepped back slightly, creating distance. Subtle, but noticeable. Emily stayed where she was, still beside the journalist, not stepping back anymore, not disappearing. The journalist raised her phone again, not hiding it, not softening it, capturing everything. The officer looked around, at all of them, at the situation, at what it had become, and for the first time, he understood. This wasn't something he could control anymore. This wasn't something he could reshape. This was already out, already seen, already real. Daniel adjusted his sleeve slightly. Small movement, calm, composed, but final, because now the truth wasn't coming. It was already here, and the only thing left was what happened next. The car arrived 10 minutes later, unmarked, quiet, but heavy with authority. Two people stepped out, one in uniform, one in a suit. The officer's posture changed instantly, straighter, tighter, controlled. "Sir," the uniformed supervisor said, short, direct. "What happened here?" The first officer opened his mouth, then paused, just for a second, because now the words mattered. "We had a report," he began, "of suspicious activity." The supervisor looked at Daniel, then at the journalist, then at Emily, then back at the officer. "What activity?" Silence. Again, the same silence. But now, it sounded worse. The man in the suit stepped forward, calm, measured, eyes sharp. "Name?" he asked. "Daniel Carter." The man froze, just slightly. Recognition. Immediate. "You're expected at Central Hall," he said. Not a question, a statement. Daniel nodded once. "I am." The supervisor looked between them. Something clicked, something connected. Too late. "What is your role there?" the man in the suit asked. Daniel met his eyes, then said, "I'm the keynote speaker." The words dropped, heavy, final, irreversible. The air shifted again. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was realization. The supervisor turned slowly, looked at the first officer. Long, hard. "You stopped him." The officer didn't answer, didn't need to. It was already clear. The journalist captured everything, every second, every expression. The supervisor exhaled, slow, controlled, then step aside. The command came quiet, but absolute. The officer hesitated, just for a moment, then stepped back, one step, but it said everything. The second officer followed, creating space, creating distance. Too late. The damage was already done. The man in the suit turned back to Daniel. "We need to get you there," he said. Daniel didn't move, didn't step forward. Not yet. Instead, he looked at the officer. One last time, not with anger, not with victory, just clarity. "You delayed me," he said quietly. The officer didn't respond. "Couldn't. You stopped the train." Silence. "You questioned me without cause." The words landed one by one, measured, precise, "and you almost detained me." A pause. Then, "You didn't ask who I was." The line stayed, because it mattered, because it explained everything. The officer looked down, just slightly, for the first time. Daniel turned away. That was enough. The car door opened. He stepped in, calm, composed. But inside, everything was still moving, fast, sharp, unresolved. The door closed. The car pulled away. The platform disappeared behind him. But the moment stayed. Central Hall was already full. Crowds outside. Security tight. Energy high. Important people. Important voices. And now, a delay. The car stopped. The man in the suit stepped out first. Opened the door. "We're behind schedule," he said. Daniel stepped out, adjusted his jacket, looked at the building. Tall, clean, prepared, ready, unlike what just happened. Inside, lights bright, people seated, voices low, waiting. The host rushed over, relieved. "You're here," she said. "We were worried." Daniel nodded slightly. "I had a delay." She smiled politely, didn't ask more, didn't know yet. "Everyone's ready," she said. He followed her, down the hallway, toward the stage, each step steady, but heavier now, because this wasn't just a speech anymore. This was something else, something real. The host stepped onto the stage first, smiling, professional. "Ladies and gentlemen," the room quieted. Instantly, "we appreciate your patience." A pause. Then, "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Daniel Carter." Applause. Strong, confident, respectful. Daniel stepped onto the stage. The lights hit him, bright, focused, different from the platform, but not separate from it. He walked to the microphone, stopped, looked out, rows of faces, watching, listening, expecting. He adjusted the mic slightly, took a breath, then began. "I took the train here today." The room shifted. Small, subtle, unexpected opening. "I didn't have to." A pause. "But I wanted to." Silence. Real silence. "I wanted to sit with people." Another pause. "To observe." His eyes moved across the audience. Slow, measured, and something happened. A few people leaned forward, listening closer now. I found a seat. A beat. An empty one. The room stayed still, but it wasn't really empty. The words landed soft, but heavy. It was filled with assumptions. Silence deepened, because they felt it, even without details. People moved away. A pause. Some looked at me like I didn't belong. Another. Some said things quietly. The room tightened, subtle, but real. And then he stopped, just for a second. Let it settle. Authorities stepped in. Now, they were fully listening, not to help. A beat, but to question. His voice stayed calm. No anger, no rise, just truth. "I was asked to stand." The words echoed, because they were simple, because they were real. "I was asked for ID." Another pause. "I was told I matched something." He let that sit, didn't explain, didn't soften, and then his eyes scanned the room again. Slow, steady. "I was almost attained." The room shifted again. More now, more awareness, more discomfort, more understanding. I didn't resist. A beat. I didn't argue. Another. I just asked why. Silence. Deep, unavoidable. And there was no answer. The words landed last. Final. Heavy. Because they weren't just about him. They were about everything. He stepped back slightly, then forward again, closer to the mic. Leadership, he said quietly, is not about control. A pause. It's about responsibility. The room stayed still. No movement. No distraction. Because when you have power, his voice softened, but sharpened. People expect you to use it right. A beat. And when you don't, silence. They remember. The words stayed because they mattered, because they were real, because they just happened. He looked out again, at every face, at every listener, at every witness, then said, I remember. Silence filled the room, not empty, not passive, but heavy, because now they understood, and the moment on that train was no longer just his. It belonged to all of them. The silence held. No one moved. No one whispered. Even the air felt still. Daniel stepped back from the microphone, just slightly, not finished, but finished saying what mattered. The audience remained quiet, processing, not reacting yet, because it wasn't a speech they expected. It was something else, something closer, something uncomfortable. Then, a single clap, soft, sharp, from the middle rows. Another followed, then another, and suddenly the room filled, applause rising, not loud at first, but deep, real, the kind that comes from understanding, not performance. Daniel didn't smile, not fully, just a small shift in his expression, acknowledgement, not celebration, because this wasn't a victory, not completely. The host stepped back onto the stage, careful, measured. Thank you, Daniel, she said, her voice softer now, different. She had heard it too, felt it too. Daniel nodded once, stepped away from the mic. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling stayed. Heavy, lingering. He walked off stage, into the hallway, the noise behind him fading, replaced by quiet again. The man in the suit caught up. That was, he paused, searching, necessary. Daniel didn't respond, just kept walking. Are you all right? The man asked. A beat. I am now. But the words came slower, because they weren't simple, because they weren't complete. A phone buzzed nearby, then another, then several. The story was already moving, fast, faster than the train ever did. The journalist stood near the entrance, phone still in hand, now pressed her ear. Yes, she said, I have everything. A pause. No, it's clear. Another. I'm sending it now. She ended the call, looked up, saw Daniel, walked toward him. You handled that better than most people could, she said. He gave a small nod. I've had practice. The words weren't meant as a joke, and she knew it. Emily stood a few steps behind her, hands together, nervous again, but not silent, not anymore. I'm sorry, she said. The words came quick, soft, but real. Daniel looked at her, gentle. For what? For not speaking sooner. A pause. He held her gaze. You did speak, but not at first. No one does. The honesty landed, because it was true, because it was human. Emily nodded slowly, still processing, still learning. The journalist looked between them. This is going to be everywhere, she said. Daniel exhaled quietly. I figured. Are you ready for that? A beat. No, he said. Then, yes. Both answers true. The man in the suit stepped closer. We'll handle the formal side, he said. Internal review is already being opened. Daniel looked at him. What does that mean? It means, the man said carefully, there will be consequences. A pause. Official ones. Daniel nodded once, but his expression didn't change, because he knew that wasn't everything. That wasn't the whole cost. Back on the platform, the first officer stood alone, the supervisor in front of him, voice low, controlled, but sharp. What were you thinking? The officer didn't answer, didn't defend, didn't explain, because now there was nothing left to say. You stopped the train, the supervisor continued. You escalated without cause. A pause. And you did it in front of witnesses. The officer stared ahead, jaw tight, eyes fixed, but something inside had shifted. You're being pulled from duty, the supervisor said. The words final. Clean. Heavy. Pending investigation. The second officer stood a few steps away, silent, watching, learning. The platform felt empty now, but not quiet, because the moment was still there, echoing, back at Central Hall. Daniel stood near the exit, looking out. People passed by, some recognizing him now, some whispering, some just watching, different from before, but not entirely. The journalist approached again. One last question, she said. He looked at her. What changed the most for you today? A pause, longer this time, because the answer mattered, because it wasn't simple. He looked past her, out the glass doors, then back. The silence, he said. She tilted her head slightly. What about it? He held her gaze. It was louder than anything else. The words stayed, because they were true, because they were the real story, not just what was said, but what wasn't. Emily looked down slightly, then back up, understanding. The journalist nodded, slowly, then lowered her phone. This time, completely. Daniel stepped toward the exit, pushed the door open, light spilling in, the city waiting. Unchanged, but not the same. He stepped outside, paused for a second, took a breath, deep, steady, then kept walking. No crowd, no noise, just movement, forward, because justice didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the moment, didn't remove the weight. Sometimes the loudest thing in the room is the silence that lets it happen. That it did something else. It made it visible, and sometimes that was where change began.